You've seen the armor, you've heard the creed, and you've watched a lone bounty hunter navigate a galaxy that seems to fear and respect his people in equal measure. This is the complete history of Mandalore and its people. But as we peel back the layers of this warrior culture, a startling question emerges. How did a civilization defined by individual glory and constant infighting manage to survive a planetary genocide that would have erased any other culture from the stars? The secret isn't just in their Beskar, it's hidden within a 10,000-year-old prophecy and a specific mechanism of their creed that allowed them to retake a dead world. Let's break this history down into its defining eras. We'll start in the Primordial Age with the taming of the first Mythosaur, move through the brutal Jedi-Mandalorian wars of the Old Republic, witness the rise and fall of the pacifist new Mandalorians, survive the horror of the Great Purge, and finally look at the modern Reconquest that has changed the face of the galaxy forever. This is the way. This is the complete story of the Mandalorians. To understand the Mandalorians, you have to understand the world that forged them. Long before it was a desert, Mandalore was a vibrant green world of forests and grass-covered plains. In this primordial era, roughly 10,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the planet was ruled not by sentient beings, but by the Mythosaur, titanic reptilian sea beasts that could grow to over 30 meters in length. The history of the people begins with the legendary figure known as Mandalore the Great. According to ancient folklore, it was he who first tamed these mythical beasts, riding them into battle and establishing the very concept of the Mandalore, the sole leader of the clan. This wasn't just a feat of strength, it was the birth of an identity. The Mythosaur skull was adopted as their primary signet, a symbol that would be hammered into their armor for the next 100 centuries. During this time, the Mandalorians organized themselves into a feudal hierarchy of houses and clans. A clan was an extended family unit, while a house was a larger political alliance. It was also during these early days that they discovered Beskar, the Mandalorian iron found in the depths of their minds. This ore, capable of resisting even the strike of a lightsaber, became the cornerstone of their religion. For a Mandalorian, their armor wasn't just protection, it was a multi-generational heirloom, a record of their lineage's honor. As the Mandalorians mastered Beskar and developed their warrior code, they turned their eyes toward the stars. This era, spanning roughly 5,000 BBY to 1,000 BBY, is defined by the Mandalorian Crusades. The clans expanded violently into the Outer Rim, conquering worlds like Conquer Dawn, Crownest, and Kalevala. This expansion eventually led to the first encounter between the Mandalorians and the Jedi Order. It was a clash of fundamental philosophies. The Jedi sought peace through the Force, while the Mandalorians sought meaning through combat. Because they were not Force sensitive, the Mandalorians developed specialized technology specifically to counter Jedi abilities. Jetpacks for mobility, wrist-mounted flamethrowers to bypass lightsaber parries, and whistling bird projectiles to overwhelm Force reflexes. The most famous conflict of this era was the Mandalorian-Jedi War. In the current canon, we know this war reached a cataclysmic end at the Battle of Malachor V. The Jedi Ravan, a name that echoes both through legends and canon, led the Republic forces. The battle ended when a superweapon known as the Mass Shadow Generator was activated, crushing the Mandalorian fleet and devastating the planet. The defeat was so total that the Mandalorians were forced to disarm and their leadership was shattered. However, even in this era of animosity, there was a bridge between these two worlds, Tar Vizsla. Around 1050 BBY, Tar Vizsla became the first Mandalorian ever inducted into the Jedi Order. As a Jedi, he forged a unique weapon, the Darksaber. This black-bladed lightsaber featured a hilt of high-quality Beskar and a jagged sword-like blade. Tar eventually returned to Mandalore, united the clans, and ruled as the Mandalore. After his death, the Darksaber was kept in the Jedi Temple until House Vizsla members liberated it during the fall of the Old Republic, turning it into the ultimate symbol of the right to rule Mandalore. Following the devastating wars of the Old Republic, Mandalore entered a period of relative quiet during the High Republic era, roughly 500 to 100 years before the movies. For the Galactic Republic, this was a golden age, and records from this time indicate that the Mandalorians hadn't kicked up any trouble for generations. But don't mistake this for true peace. While the Republic saw them as humbled, Mandalore was internally fracturing. Without a common enemy in the Jedi or the Sith, the clans turned their blades on each other. This was the era where the War of the Houses truly took root. The once vibrant world was slowly being killed by its own people, as centuries of interclan warfare and industrial Beskar mining began to destroy the planet's atmosphere and biodiversity. The stage was being set for a radical ideological shift. The turning point in Mandalore's environment and politics came in 738 BBY, with an event known as the Mandalorian Excision, the Dralhan, or Annihilation. The Republic, fearing a resurgence of Mandalorian militarism, launched a massive orbital bombardment. This glassed large portions portions of the planet, turning its surface into a barren, white sand desert of Trinitite. From the ashes of this destruction rose the new Mandalorians. This was a pacifist movement that believed the old warrior ways had brought nothing but ruin. They advocated for a total rejection of weapons and armor in favor of diplomacy and neutrality. To survive the now hostile environment, they built massive domed cities like Sundari to house the population in climate-controlled safety. This led to the Great Clan Wars around 42 BBY, a brutal civil war between the pacifist New Mandalorians led by House Kryze and the martial traditionalists who refused to abandon their heritage. During this conflict, Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi spent a year protecting a young Duchess Satine Kryze from insurgents and bounty hunters. The New Mandalorians eventually won, and the traditionalist warriors were exiled to the moon of Concordia, where the Republic believed they would slowly die out. When the Clone Wars began in 22 BBY, Mandalore stood as a pillar of neutrality. Duchess Satine led the Council of the Neutral Systems, refusing to side with the Republic or the Separatists. But beneath the surface of the moon Concordia, the traditionalists had not only survived, they had evolved into a terrorist cell known as Death Watch, led by Governor Pre Vizsla. Death Watch sought to restore Mandalore's warrior past through violence. Initially allied with Count Dooku, they eventually found a more dangerous partner, the former Sith Lord Maul. Together, they formed the Shadow Collective, a criminal empire that orchestrated a fake attack on Mandalore, allowing Death Watch to save the people and seize power. But the alliance was short-lived. Maul challenged Pre Vizsla to a traditional duel for the right to rule. In a brutal battle, Maul beheaded Vizsla with the Darksaber, claiming the weapon and the throne. This caused a rift in Mandalorian society. A splinter group led by Satine's sister, Bo-Katan Kryze, refused to serve an outsider. The tragedy culminated in the execution of Duchess Satine by Maul, an act of revenge against Obi-Wan Kenobi that effectively ended the pacifist era of Mandalore. The conflict ended with the Siege of Mandalore in 19 BBY. Bo-Katan allied with former Jedi Ahsoka Tano and a division of the 501st Legion to liberate the planet from Maul. Maul was captured, but the victory was hollow. As the Republic celebrated, Order 66 was issued, and the Republic's presence instantly transformed into an Imperial occupation. The Empire did not recognize Bo-Katan as regent. Instead, they installed Gar Saxon, a former super commando, as viceroy. For nearly 2 decades, Mandalore was a vassal state, its Beskar plundered to build Imperial war machines. Resistance wouldn't truly ignite until the appearance of Sabine Wren, a member of House Vizsla and a rebel fighter. Sabine reclaimed the Darksaber from Dathomir and used it to unite the clans, eventually handing the blade to Bo-Katan to lead a new rebellion against the Empire. This rebellion, however, triggered the darkest chapter in Mandalorian history, the Great Purge. Realizing they could never truly control the Mandalorians, the Empire decided to eliminate them. This began with the Night of 1,000 Tears. Imperial TIE bombers launched an orbital bombardment using fusion bombs that targeted Mandalore's domed cities. Sundari was razed to the ground. Following the bombing, security droids and probe droids scoured the ruins to terminate any survivors. In a final attempt to save her people, Bo-Katan met with Imperial Security Bureau officer Gideon. She surrendered and gave him the Darksaber in exchange for a ceasefire. Gideon betrayed the deal, continued the massacre, and took the Darksaber for himself. The surviving Mandalorians were forced to scatter across the galaxy in what became known as the Diaspora. In the years following the Purge, the Mandalorian people existed in small secretive pockets throughout the galaxy. One of the most significant was the Children of the Watch. This fundamentalist sect adhered to the Way of the Mandalore, an orthodox interpretation of the Creed that included the strict rule of never removing one's helmet. This group survived the Purge because they were cloistered on the moon of Concordia, which the Empire had largely ignored during the initial attack. They emphasized the importance of foundlings, orphans raised within the culture. One such foundling was Din Djarin. Around 9 BBY, during the early years of the New Republic, the fate of Mandalore began to shift. Din Djarin, seeking to return a Force-sensitive child named Grogu to his people, inadvertently became the focal point of a Mandalorian resurgence. In a confrontation with the now Moff Gideon, Din defeated him in single combat and won the Darksaber. This created a political stalemate. Bo-Katan needed the blade to lead, but tradition dictated it could only be won in combat, and she refused to fight Din for it. The final act of Mandalore's history, at least so far, is the reconquest of their homeworld. It began when Din Djarin traveled to Mandalore to bathe in the living waters and redeem himself for removing his helmet. Accompanied by Bo-Katan, they discovered that the planet was not poisoned as the Empire had claimed, but was slowly recovering. In the depths of the living waters, we witnessed something impossible, a living Mythosaur. This sighting was of immense spiritual significance. The beast, thought extinct for millennia, had returned to herald a new age. This omen allowed Bo-Katan to unify the factions, the fundamentalist Children of the Watch and the pragmatic Night Owls. Together, they launched a military campaign to retake the planet. They discovered that Moff Gideon had built a secret base on Mandalore, where he was attempting to create a new generation of Dark Troopers using Mandalorian armor and Jedi Force abilities. In the final battle, Gideon's base was destroyed. During the struggle, Gideon himself crushed the Darksaber, destroying the ancient symbol of leadership. But rather than breaking the Mandalorians, this loss seemed to finalize their growth. They no longer needed a magic sword to be unified. The victory was secured, and the armorer handed Bo-Katan the flame to reignite the Great Forge. Mandalore was theirs once more. Din Djarin officially adopted Grogu as Din Grogu, establishing a new lineage for the next generation of Mandalorian warriors. From the taming of the first Mythosaur to the destruction of the Darksaber, the history of Mandalore has been a cycle of destruction and rebirth. It is a story of a people who were nearly erased by the Jedi, the Sith, and the Empire, yet survived because their identity wasn't tied to a single throne or a single planet. It was tied to their creed. Today, Mandalore stands as a world in recovery. The Darksaber is gone, but the Mythosaur has returned. The clans are no longer fighting for a seat in Sundari. They're fighting for the survival of their culture. As they look toward an uncertain future in the New Republic era, one thing remains certain. As long as there is one person to speak the words of the Creed, Mandalore will never truly die. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of the galaxy's most resilient warriors, don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments, do you think Bo-Katan will be the one to finally tame the Mythosaur? Thanks for watching. This is The Way.